Welcome. Just before we start, don't take this in any kind of bad way, because we've got quite a lot of questions to get through. We're going to aim to do roughly, if you can try and keep your answers short and even to a minute. So I don't want to have to use it, but I might be running a stopwatch at some point, and we will try and do our part as well. That's so that we can actually get more out of you. So it's not so you can't talk. It's just so that we can actually just keep through the questions, and you'll get to talk, and of course put your points across anyway. So I'm going to hand over to Deputy Andrews just to give the opening questions, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being in attendance today. The panel was obviously aware that last Thursday you attended an event, Population Open the Doors or Pull Up the Drawbridge. And I just wanted to know, what was your key message that you wanted to convey to the audience?
The key message was about the awareness of the demographic challenge, the fact that we have this big healthcare need and social care need over the next 15 years. The fact that we're already seeing that in action, and the previous day I spoke to the Chamber of Commerce and showed them a graph of how both health funding, or principally health funding, has increased significantly in the last 6 or 7 years. So that demographic challenge is testing us today. It's not something that will start in 2040. It's already started and we're moving there. And that ultimately, whilst the Future Economy Programme is designed to reduce the need for inward migration by increasing productivity of businesses, there is still a need for inward migration in order to maintain the economy and the quality of life in the island.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned there about net inward migration, and I think there was in fact one business leader who said we need to be relying on net inward migration, but to what extent are we going to be relying on net inward migration?
I'd say that depends on the ability for businesses in Jersey to increase their productivity. And I say that that's not me putting it on businesses, it's all of us in that sense. The more growth we can achieve with the existing population, the less need we will have for inward migration. But, you know, the story of my life in Jersey for 50 years now is we've always relied on inward migration. That's been, you know, I don't know of any period in my lifetime in Jersey where inward migration hasn't been necessary.
Of course, there is some rhetoric as well from some sections of the island community saying, look, we are already overpopulated, and there is now this view that there should be a reliance on more net inward migration from their perspective. So what do you think the government could do to try and curb the extent of net inward migration, and how would you go about doing that?
So I think it all comes into the productivity play. So it is the same idea, but that's also government productivity and government efficiency. The way we reduce the need for net migration is by generating more value from our businesses, from ourselves, you know, per person in the island. That is the basic way. Yep. A really clear area where this could help would be the adoption of artificial intelligence kind of software in key areas. I know the private sector is adopting it in different areas. Yep. I think government needs to as well, and that particularly in processes, administrative areas, enabling people to be freed up to work on much more high value areas. Yep. I think that is one key area that could help.
And obviously, Minister, we've just seen the outcome of Brexit, and obviously there are relatively new trends in terms of the island's population, and of course the net inward migration coming into the island in terms of says maybe new nationalities who tend to be coming to the island to work. Yeah. So how do you reflect upon the report that was published yesterday, and were you surprised at some of the figures that you saw as well?
No, none of the figures in there surprised me at all. You know, if there was a surprise, it's that the population has increased slightly, so I wasn't entirely sure whether it had or not. You know, the population has increased slightly. That is like, if Jersey's to continue being a successful island economically and also socially, you know, given current trends, we will need to see the population increase further. It does bring pressures. There are no questions about that. Yep. You know, you get cultural pressures that build up. We are recruiting people from much further afield because of Brexit. Yep. And as a result, I think, you know, perhaps the government needs to play a greater role in helping new arrivals in the island understand what the island is, how it is, our values, you know, things like this. Just because there can end up being, you know, cultural clashes, let's say. Because people don't understand the new place they're living in. And so I think there is potentially a role for government there, though I would say at the moment, you know, I don't see any direct signs of discontent.
No.
Or, you know, but some people will be against population growth.
Yeah.
I remember meeting people like that in elections, and I'll say the same thing to them as, you know, as I say now, which is, at the moment, we have no other way of generating economic growth that will pay for the island's kind of changing demographics. So if we don't, at the moment, have population growth, we will become, all of us, significantly poor.
Yeah.
Can I just, and I've not had a chance to fully look at the population report from yesterday, but it does comment that nearly a third to 32% of this registered population held a temporary work permit. Have you got any thoughts about that figure and how it compares to previously, and whether that's at quite a high figure?
I haven't reflected, but I have to admit, it's like similarly to you, I kind of snatched reading the report through bits of work from yesterday, so I haven't properly reflected on it. I wouldn't be able to.
Have you got any kind of handle, even if it's an anecdotal one, or personal feeling about the makeup of the island, in the sense that if population is essentially stable, I think I shared your thoughts that population might have dipped, but actually, do you have any inkling that there might be a lot more migrant workers who are perhaps housed differently to what the population might be? So are there lots of people living in hotel accommodation, farm accommodation, than there might have been 5 or 10 years ago?
Genuinely, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have more time to reflect.
It's worth us looking into.
Yeah, sorry to cut in.
Not at all.
Minister, can I just ask, in terms of the reference you made to temporary work permits, what arrangements are you, or have you got in place with the Home Affairs Minister to actually assist with the inward migration approach that you've just been talking about, where it's suggested that maybe some of the work permit arrangements at the moment may well be problematic?
Yeah, people have different views on work permits, there's no question. So we work with the Home Affairs Department, and particularly in trying to help them understand the needs of the island at any given time. Where I've seen us most clearly kind of work with them is around business licensing. I actually see some of the applications, and so one of the things I did a couple of years ago was set up a framework which enabled me to delegate some of the decisions around business licensing to officers from the population department rather than Home Affairs. But you know, it's things like that which, by providing clear policy, it enables officers then to get on and process the work. I don't know, Richard, if there's anything from your perspective about our liaison with the Home Affairs Department.
No, not really. I mean, individual employers may have specific needs from time to time, for example, in the agricultural industry, and they're trying to make good provisions. So, I mean, the Albert Bartlett's, who, you know, the main exporter of the Jersey Roll product, they're working through a project at the moment on staff accommodation to be able to accommodate their workers when they come in. And they've asked us for some help and support, you know, within government, just to make that happen as quickly but properly as possible before they start to bring workers back in December ahead of next year's growing season. So we get those representations more on an ad hoc basis rather than there's anything fundamentally flawed with the way that the established process actually works in practice.
Are there any changes to the licensing or work permit rules that you think would support the economic activity that you're trying to generate here?
Yeah. We haven't sat down and discussed what changes it would be. Obviously, I do know from different areas of the business community the kind of different views they have. So I know I'm often asked by hospitality, could they have longer work permits? Equally, I know that the 9-month work permit works very well still in the farming sector. So, you know, hospitality and farming have two different needs there. I think the previous Home Affairs Minister did a lot of work to create these kind of 1-year work permits that can be rolled over for a maximum of 3 years. I thought that was a very good signal to the hospitality sector. The government works with them and tries to solve their issues. I think there's a desire to push them even further from the hospitality sector. The policy at the moment is that anyone who's on one of those 1-year rolling up to 3 years visas the business can help them gain skills and put them on the skills development pathway, which would enable those people to then apply for skilled visas, which then enables them to stay in Jersey for longer and potentially bring family and things like this. So there are pathways to longer staying, and I remain open and will always, you know, speak on behalf of industries for their views. But I do accept that from a Home Affairs perspective, it's always really difficult because processes don't capture the entirety of the human condition. And so there will always be exceptions and needs that perhaps aren't being fulfilled.
Can I follow up on the population figures? So again, just coming to terms with them, but some of the headlines are that European migration, so not including Jersey or British in that, has gone down by 7%, but that rest of world has gone up from 1850 to 5030, so it's a 172% increase. Without knowing, of course, the breakdown of all of those jobs and all of those individuals, can it be surmised reasonably that the growth is really in the lower paid job sector?
I think a lot of it is, not all of it is. There's plenty of people working in finance who are coming from the rest of the world. So you would have to analyse it rather than surmise it.
And in government and healthcare and other settings,
that's very true.
Government are increasingly looking much further afield than perhaps was the case, 5-10 years ago.
And this is, you mentioned Brexit, and I need to say it. The reason we're having to look further beyond Europe for staff is entirely down to Brexit.
Okay. So what isn't necessarily captured in those figures is that, because even those figures don't match up, if you count the ones who have left to European migration in the other way, it seems that there are a lot more coming in to fill those roles. And is there also a possibility like Jersey-born people have been leaving the island, Jersey-born working age people or retired people?
Jersey-born people always leave the island.
But in more numbers, I'm talking about in larger numbers.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think we capture it properly to know. It's interesting. I was reading media immediately before coming in here, and they understandably talked about young people leaving the island. I would love to know, and I doubt it's something we can know, but I would love to know if it's different amounts to previously, because throughout my life, and I'm sure it's the same for you, certainly, young people have always left Jersey. I left Jersey, I came back. My sister left Jersey, she hasn't come back. That's the story of Jersey and being a small island.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But we don't know the quantities, and that would be so much better if we did.
The other headline is that the largest increases have been with Kenyan and Filipino nationalities. And do we know what kind of industries predominantly they would be working in?
I can't hazard a guess. I have met Filipino and Kenyan workers in hospitality, principally. I also believe certainly we have Filipino workers in the farming sector, but I'm sure also we have some in the finance sector and elsewhere. I don't know the breakdown of where these people go.
Okay, thank you. Have you finished with your line?
Yes,
Kirsten?
yeah.
There was just one follow-up, if I can. You mentioned that in relation to people coming from the rest of the world as a consequence of Brexit, what do you think is the reason why people are not coming from Europe to apply for work permits? Why do you
Because
think
they
that's
need
the
more
case?
than a work permit. And, if you're a Polish person who's looking to work outside of Poland, you can choose Jersey. But to get here, you'll need to get a visa from the UK before you can get your work permit for Jersey.
So do Kenyans and Filipinos.
But that Polish person can also choose to go to Germany or France or Hungary or wherever in the EU without any permits or visas needed. Kenyan may be able to do that within some regional trade bodies. I don't know. It's possible, but we know that Europe as a wealthier part of the world is always attractive to people. But at the end of the day, if you're an EU citizen, you do not need a work permit or a visa to work in another EU country. Britain has put itself and Jersey into the situation where you do need visas to now work if you're Polish.
So is that a reason why the work with the Immigration Service or the Home Affairs Department is important for you economically? Because there's issues around skills gaps in the workforce, and is it suggested that because we're not drawing on the skills in the European market that Jersey is suffering as a consequence of that, but we're over-relying on the sort of semi-skilled or unskilled workforce to actually maintain and support our economy because it's easy for them to come here?
I think it's something that should be looked into, because I don't believe we have the research around that or the data around that to substantiate what you're saying. It doesn't mean I'm not saying either way, whether it's true or false.
Yeah, just
I don't
inquiring
believe we have
just
the
to-
data. I don't
yeah.
believe we have the data to substantiate that, and also the level of skills. No idea what the level of skills are coming from Kenya or the Philippines or elsewhere. But it is correct that we are not getting European workers coming to Jersey, and that is a consequence of Brexit. One thing I just want to do a quick plug: we do have a system with France where French citizen students can come to Jersey for 6 months. They will need a work permit, but not a visa. And it's a student permit to work in a related industry to their course. So if they're studying business or finance in France, they can come as a degree student, they can come to Jersey for 6 months and do a stage, as you'd say in France, in a Jersey business. And that's a scheme between us and France. It's a really good scheme, and it's one that I
Will
wish
you collect the data
employers knew more
on
about
that?
to be able to take advantage of it.
You would collect some data on that to see what the uptake of that would be.
So the scheme's been there for years. The uptake, I think, is extremely low because people just don't know about it. It's why I took the opportunity to plug it, literally because people don't know about it. And I think,
Okay.
Would that be harder to negotiate now with other countries, given?
I think this is something we should do as an island.
Would
I
the,
think we
would the
should be
UK
going for
let us do it?
I think we need to ask the UK to let us do it.
And would that have support from other ministers, Home Affairs?
I don't know. I haven't asked them.
There's one.
I was going to say, I've been presuming it to be unskilled or semi-skilled that are coming in. So very skilled and professionally qualified workers in the finance industry coming in from East Africa, South Africa, and so on. So again, even finance industry, they're looking for well-qualified, English-speaking professionals from an increasingly large distance away from Jersey, because they aren't able to get enough of the raw talent that they need from within. So.
What it seems to be, though, is that there used to be a political policy, I think, which may still be in place, is that the idea was to attract or to create higher paid jobs. So when there was net inward immigration, it was usually to be filled people working in higher paid jobs. But the evidence here seems to be that there's been a proliferation of lower paid work for immigrant workers. Does that have any consequences, or is it a problem?
No, I think it's the reality. So I think it was always something of a wish or a dream that you would only import higher paying jobs. And actually, when I see some of the more extreme right-wing views that are trumpeted around America or the UK or France, often they're saying, we know we need immigration, but we need the right immigration, high skills for high value jobs. That's a dream. It's not a reality, because we also know that how many people born in Jersey are willing to go and pick potatoes in the field? How many people born in Jersey, and there are some, are willing to go and work in care homes looking after elderly people? There are some people from Jersey, but not enough. And so we know that the lower paid jobs are not being taken up by islanders or people who perhaps from Europe or the UK. And so we absolutely need those lower paid jobs to be filled via migration. And anyone in any country, the UK, the USA or elsewhere, who suggests otherwise is not being honest with the electorate.
Do we collect any data on the flow of that migration into skilled or unskilled or semi-skilled work, so that we can track the trends? So if we're trying to make Jersey a very attractive place to come and work, and we want to attract people with skills as much as we want to attract people with who are supporting the economy in a different way, do we actually track whether we're actually on track to retain talent, to attract talent, or are we sort of skewed towards the need to just make sure that we've got people in jobs to actually keep the economy sustainable in those areas where Jersey people would not prefer or not choose to take up that work?
So certainly we know how many work permits for which jobs are being issued. Whether it's put against trends of kind of likely skills need versus where we are, I'm not sure that happens in quite the same way. Deputy Alves, who's leading population policy, may have a better understanding of it. I think Richard may have shaken his head as I said that we perhaps don't do that.
Only for departmental context.
Yes,
So I'm
from
not
our
aware.
main
Other
government,
departments may well do that. Yeah.
But it's something you don't collect.
No,
in
our
common.
department doesn't collect.
Can I ask a slightly different question? I know you won't mind me saying you're an internationalist in your worldview.
Yeah.
Are there unintended, maybe psychological and cultural consequences for Jersey if because I think we're seeing changes that we saw between the 90th and turn of the 19th, 20th centuries, where you've got a period of natural depopulation of maybe an indigenous population and high levels of immigration from lower paid workers. At that time it was Bretons and Normans, now it's Filipinos and Kenyans. And is there a risk that we're moving to unintendedly to maybe more of a Dubai model where all the service and the lower paid service industries, we're just going to see people in Jersey who are obvious, who look different to us and who we only see them by their worth in terms of what jobs they do? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I know you're trying to speak carefully, and I appreciate that.
Trying to speak carefully because you know my views on
absolutely.
On this as well.
Again, I think you and I are very international in our outlook. So I think with immigration, Jersey, I think there's always an issue of social cohesion around large amounts of immigration, no matter where it comes from. So I said in that population debate that from the kind of 50s onwards, we had a massive amount of immigration from the United Kingdom. That fundamentally changed the culture in Jersey in a way that I find still now difficult, because I strongly like my kind of Gérier French roots as well, but the languages I heard being spoken when I was a child are no longer spoken in Jersey, and that's because of that wave of immigration from the UK. I personally have always felt more comfortable with the idea that you get immigration from many different places, and then as an island we can help define and evolve our own strong identity as an island, rather than importing one identity from elsewhere. So whilst I personally am quite comfortable with an international kind of influx of immigration, I appreciate that it can cause social issues. I don't think those social issues need happen. I appreciate they can be there.
What I was really getting at, I suppose, is there going to be any opportunity for social mobility for immigrant workers who come to Jersey? Because I've never liked the term of unskilled workers. I think we've actually got very skilled workers who come from a diverse background who can actually do lots of jobs, possibly only allowed to do certain jobs. Is there going to be an opportunity for social mobility for certain of those workers to make Jersey their long-term home?
I would like to think so. Obviously, someone's on a 9-month work permit, they're not going to be able to. But people who are on here for those longer-term work permits, I absolutely want them to be able to think that they can make Jersey their home, and that means social mobility.
Do we have the levers to do that, do you think?
I would like to think so. At the end of the day, one of the levers perhaps that we don't have so much is, or that a lever we have, which we use, which perhaps we shouldn't, is we tie our work permits to employers. And so that in itself is going to create issues around social mobility. Some people might suggest it's got bigger issues than that around modern slavery and things like this. But we do tie work permits and therefore employees to employers. That's something we could look at changing potentially. And it has been relaxed in some areas. But I know very well, and I think we all do, when we had a lot of immigration from Europe during up to 2020, 2000 to 2020, lots of people would come from Poland or Romania, and they'd come in working in hospitality or farming. But then once their 5 years was up, so to speak, and they were able to work anywhere within Jersey's workforce, they would move into finance and higher skilled jobs. And I think everyone has to be able to see a future for themselves. Doesn't matter where you're from, you always want to see a progression in your future. And so I think Jersey should always be able to offer a progression in people's future if they're here, for more than just the 9 months.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to move on to the issues around the living wage and the measures that have been introduced. So the Better Business Support Package was launched in March. Could you just give us an outline about how many grants have been applied for and awarded to date? And can you provide a breakdown as to how many were major, minor or apprenticeship grants?
Okay, I don't have a list of all the different grants that have been issued. I'm just looking through my figures here across all the different areas. I absolutely will get you the figures. So, around apprenticeships grants versus better business grants versus tourism grants. But I do know that on the Better Business Support Package grants themselves, they're kind of 2.8 million for productivity grants. We have seen, a really impressive ratio of, for every £100 spent by government on those grants, £190 is coming from the private sector, and that's a superb
Did you expect
multiplier
that?
effect.
Did you expect that?
No, do you know what? I didn't. I hoped, I didn't expect. And in my mind, when we were talking about this, because it was a 50-50 grant funding situation, I just, in my head for the modelling, it was just 50-50 all the way. I'd never, you know, as
What
a
do you think
conservative
that
estimate.
says to you?
I think it says that there is a desire to invest in business in Jersey. We know we've got a really low business investment rate. That's something we want to change. I think this shows that government has stimulated that investment, and that's a really good thing. People may say government shouldn't have to. I agree it shouldn't, but I think it does. You know, there is a fundamental reality in Jersey's business community. We don't invest enough in our own businesses, as either as owners not reinvesting, or as or as external investors looking to place it. And so what we've done is shown that investment can happen, and we've stimulated it.
And in relation to the other grants, how do you think they're doing?
Yeah, I don't have the figures about the other grants, I'm afraid. It's kind of embarrassing that I don't have
Okay.
them at the moment.
All right,
But we
so
know, so what we do know is the skills grants haven't been taken up in the way that we expected them to. I think that might talk to the trainee rate. Certainly it's what the business community was talking about, the loss of the trainee rate, one reason why it's come back.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, an area we need to look at.
Okay. Thank you for that. In terms of the, you state that in the Better Business support package arrangements that it's your overall ambition to increase productivity and protecting competitiveness. Can you tell us how the package is working to achieve this so far?
So again, I will only know that once I understand all the types of projects that have been funded, but they, you know, it is a huge difference. I know one organisation that's taken on money to install a new software system. At the very low end, you know, this is a client relationship management system, a really simple system. It's only a few £1,000s. But that helps them keep data and relate to their clients better, and therefore increase their productivity through better client relationships and better client management. Equally, we've seen businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector, invest in actual kind of refurbishments, and either whether it's bedrooms or whether it's foyers, they're using that money with their own money to actually invest in the hotels, and which is again something that we desperately need.
Is there any particular sector where you've witnessed more interest in actually securing that support?
I don't have that at the moment. I'll look into it. I don't think we've had any one sector stand out above any other, but I do know that we have had strong interest from hospitality and agriculture as well. I know the third sector have been getting involved, so it's been a wide ranging, a wide range of sectors.
Okay. One of the things that you talked to the panel about was that from one of the grants, £751,000 went to Bergerac. I think it came from the destination marketing grant. We haven't seen any reports of any direct income from that investment. Can you advise when the government expects to receive that financial return, and what do you think that might be?
I'll turn to Heath here, if that's all right. Heath, do we have a sense of when we will get that money? Because you're right, there has been no direct income from it yet.
So we understand the first recoup on Bergerac Series 1 will be next year. We've had...
When you say next year, Heath, does that mean at the beginning, middle, end? Have you got a time frame that you've
no, but I can
sort
come
of
back to you on it.
expected
So I know it
to
is in
see that return?
Yeah, so it was due 2026, but I can come back to you on when in 2026. I don't recall.
Is that likely? Is it a definite return, or is it conditional on certain targets being met by them?
No, it was a percentage after the first cut. So there was
Right.
It was all on international sales. I think it was the first £750,000. I think
Yes.
Went to the producers, and then after we were getting 12% of sales after that.
Yeah.
Okay. On all platforms or on certain?
As I understand it, it was sales.
So you think there'll be some tangible money trickling in?
I hope so. We have sold Bergerac, not we. The producers have sold Bergerac to a number of other nations, and so I would hope to see that.
How are you tracking that?
The sales?
Yes.
So we have a quarterly partnership meeting with Visit Jersey, and that is a standing item on that agenda. So you have to remember that investment was channeled through Visit Jersey. It was a priority of theirs as a marketing, destination marketing campaign, in essence. So considering the scale of the investment, we ensure it's a standing agenda item, and any new territory sales are reported in that meeting. We can come back to you with a 1 or 2 pager if you'd like on the recoup, the anticipated level, the timing, any new territories that have been sold, the rights to, etc.
I think that would be helpful, because I think people are looking for that information to say, was it worth it? Is it actually doing what it says on the tin in terms of promoting Jersey and actually generating economic activity as a consequence?
That's what we want to know.
Consequence of it. So we want.
I think it's important to look at it in that context. So the government didn't support Visit Jersey for money for Bergerac with a view to us becoming a sort of screenplay investor. It wasn't done for that reason. It was done to drive interest in Jersey in the hope that that helps as another plank of growing the visitor economy. So first and foremost, it's that growth in visitors and reasons for coming to Jersey that should be dominating. Anything else that we're getting by way of additional proceeds or returns from sale of the rights, that sort of jam on top, and the intention is that that would get reinvested back into Visit Jersey.
Exactly.
But we haven't seen the kind of visitor interest, perhaps maybe that was originally anticipated as yet.
Interest we have, actual
Translating
on seats
it
is
into-
different.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
'Cause,
yeah.
I mean, one of the stats I got here was effectively a 2/3 increase in online searches for Jersey following the launch of Bergerac. So interest, definitely.
Yeah,
Is that
but it's
caused
the
it
But then
translation.
actually
Is
on
that
a plane
caused-
booking a hotel, different matter.
Can I, sorry to ask,
And different factors come into it.
just because I had trouble finding Bergerac initially to watch it, so I had to download a particular app, I think, on my television, which wasn't straightforward. Our core market remains the UK for tourism, doesn't it? So do we know if many UK television viewers are watching Bergerac?
Yeah.
And how easy is it for them to watch? It's not on BBC, is it? Or
No,
not
it was on You, which
You?
is...
'Cause I'd never heard of
which
You
is
until
big.
until
And it
Bergerac.
depends which TV platform
Yeah.
you have. So on Sky, I know in the week of the launch, if you turned on your Sky box, the very front page of Sky was just Bergerac.
Yeah.
Big, 50-inch screen, you had 50-inch Bergerac up front in front of you. So it's very easy on some packages to find it. On others, it may be less easy. But we know that You, as a channel, had their best ever figures for the launch of Bergerac. They had never had such good figures, and it was about, if I remember rightly, about 1 million viewers.
Yeah. Has any thought been given to maybe tying it to the old Bergerac as well? There still are visitors who come to Jersey because they know the old Bergerac series is the...
Well, again, I know that you can tell, I can tell which TV platform I have. I know on Sky that they were absolutely rerunning the old Bergerac in the run-up to the launch of the new Bergerac. Okay. We haven't, I don't think, through our advertising, etc., tied the two together, and that might be something worth asking Visit Jersey.
Okay. Last one from me in terms of the registered employee support scheme. This was a £300,000 grant that was given to support lower income workers who've lived in Jersey for more than 5 years. This scheme was due to be sort of reviewed in Q3 2025. Are you still on track with that review?
So
Where is
that's
it up
not
to?
I've got to say that's not our part of the Better Business Support Package. That's entirely for the Social Security Minister.
Okay.
It was her request in this package that she wanted to help people who hadn't been here for 5 years but would still need support. So I'm afraid all of that. We would ask the Social Security Minister for her analysis, but it is very much her analysis.
Okay.
And that was very much her part of the package.
In terms of the package, what sort of observations are you making about how that is supporting lower income workers?
I haven't at the moment got any observations in that particular perspective. I think once the productivity investment grants go through, I would hope that it helps all workers, but particularly lower income workers, in the work that they do, enables them to not just be more productive in themselves, but kind of free them up to work in different areas within the business as well. I think it should give them more freedom within their roles. But we have to wait and see. You know, this is the first kind of 6-month report. It's very much just the bare bones of the report. We're a long way yet from doing any analysis on kind of the socio-economic gains in the wider long term.
So given that you've committed £300,000 in the form of a grant, how satisfied are you about the way in which the scheme is operating?
The whole thing, or just the 300,000?
Just the 300,000?
Well, I was going to say, at the moment, I'm unable to comment on that. I would need to speak to the Social Security Minister about that. But I think, you know, when the Social Security Minister made the suggestion that she would like to see about £300,000 to help registered employees, it seemed like a very good idea to me. I understood that there was this, again, what she was trying to do was fill a gap in the existing system. And I think it was a worthy gap to be filled, and so I supported her in having that part of the grant for her department.
So in terms of managing the performance from that department in relation to investment that you've made in it,
Well, the
Well,
thing is, it's her money.
The money doesn't come to this department or this minister.
No.
It goes directly to Ash through the Minister for Social Security. So it's not a grant from us to another department. We never saw that 300,000 in the first place. It has gone straight to that other minister's head of expenditure.
And what you must remember as well is this is Social Security money in the first place. So the £10 million per year is £10 million from the Social Security Reserve Fund. So in that sense as well, it's the Social Security Minister's money, which she's passed to us, £9.7 million worth of it. And that 300,000 in a sense never left her department.
okay, thank you. If you clarify.
Minister, can we turn to the visitor economy? So I've got a number of questions on this area. First of all, can you just talk to us about your analysis of the dip in numbers and remind us of what the decline was in tourists so far this year?
Yeah, so I think we've seen about 14% decline. And
Up to what point was that?
that's up to
June?
July. June.
June. We've got 16 here, but that's
Okay,
just, we won't
16, I
quibble over it.
apologise. I've read the number 14 that I'd written down earlier, but that was Guernsey's decrease in the year before, sorry.
16%. Year to date, January to July versus same period 2024 was 16%. Yeah.
And you've been reporting in the media of saying that's not just down to the ferries, but there are other factors
Yeah, that's
included
right.
in that. What are those other factors?
So, well, we know it's not just down to the ferries because there was a greater decrease in the passenger numbers through air. And so obviously DFDS had nothing to do with air passengers.
a greater number,
so,
not
yeah.
percentage-wise though.
No, a greater number of passengers were few. So there was a greater decrease in the passengers.
Only by
via
number
air.
though, but not as a percentage.
Yeah, but numbers are more important than percentages. Percentages are relative, and percentages can tell a myriad of funny stories, whereas actual numbers tell you. So we saw a greater decrease in air passengers than ferry passengers. So we know it's not just a ferry story.
Have you got
by that fact alone?
Have you got the figures?
It's about 1,000 difference. It's just shy of 26,000 air passengers and just shy of 25,000 sea passengers.
Do we know why that is at all?
Well, so again, this is, and again, I will say it all again, as I've said to you before. We know there is a complete lack of confidence in the UK holiday market and consumer market at the moment. We have seen Ireland, Iceland, and other UK-dependent nations see significant falls in their number of UK visitors. So going to percentages, Iceland, I'm informed, saw a 13% decrease in UK passengers. Ireland saw a 9% decrease in UK passengers over the same period, January to July. So that tells us that there's a general downturn in the market. It's important, Jersey saw a really big increase. I think it was about 8% increase in 2024 in passengers. So we had a growth in 2024. We've had, yes, a decrease this year. Guernsey's done the opposite. Guernsey had a big decrease of 14% last year, and this year it's seeing an increase.
Minister, can I just challenge the report here in the media says that the Ports of Jersey Chief Operating Officer said air passenger numbers had remained broadly consistent with 2024. So that
They're 25,000 lower than last year.
25,000.
I think in terms of percentages, going back to percentages, it will be a much smaller percentage.
The reason I think percentages are
I
important
think it's about 1% it worked out.
The reason I think percentages are important is when we talk about 1 or 2%, that could be fluctuations. It's never going to be exactly the same as the last year, but we have seen a big decrease in foot passengers, and also from what Jersey Heritage have said is that their lets are down by 8.5%, but actually bookings from France are down by 62%. And we know the French tend to come by boat. So is there actually also an issue with the French market more generally? And are there steps we need to take to make sure that Jersey's being advertised sufficiently?
I don't think Jersey has been advertised sufficiently in France. I have taken that up with Visit Jersey, not just this year, but last year. I don't think we have focused enough on France. And obviously with that changeover of the ferry transfer, there was less ferry-based marketing. You know, the ferry company wasn't marketing during that period. So we have seen less advertising in France. There's also just a real fact, which is when it comes to passengers from France, regardless of which tender we chose, Guernsey was going to get direct sailings to France, which it had not had before. So Guernsey was always going to see a likely increase in its foot passengers and its passengers to Guernsey. And probably that would be taken from Jersey because basically visitors from St Malo weren't able to go to Guernsey directly before. For the first time in many, many years, they're able to go directly to Guernsey for the first time. So either way, we were going to see a shift from Jersey to Guernsey, literally on the novelty factor, if nothing else.
And that would have happened irrespective of a joint Channel Islands tender award to an operator, because Guernsey specified that in the joint tender process, quite rightly from their point of view. Why would you not want to have a French day trip market into Guernsey, just as we had enjoyed for many, many years and had that market largely to ourselves? So whether it was a joint tender or whether it was the fact that two separate companies have been appointed, visitors in the St Malo region would have a choice of day trip options to go to Guernsey or to go to Jersey with effect from whatever those new operations came into being.
The deeper question is, you know, I accept that there is a global sort of issue around people travelling, but there's been a significant amount of investment put into the visitor economy work. And at what point are you actually going to realise or see the value of what that investment is going to bring to Jersey? And are there any things that you think need to change to actually change people's, you know, behaviours, activity, you know, perceptions, whatever, to actually achieve your ambition? Because I think the question we're trying to get an answer to is that there are targets set, and based on some of the conditions that you talk about, they're never going to be achieved. So the question is, are the targets realistic?
You speak in such a strange way. You talk about, so we're talking about one...
It's not strange.
No,
it's
we were
just
talking about a
to...
7-month period from January to July. And I just said to you beforehand, last year we had a 14% increase, sorry, an 8% increase in passengers to Jersey. So
We've got
we're
25,000
talking
seats that haven't been
transitional
filled.
year. We're talking one transitional year, and we're only 7 months into that transitional year in terms of the figures that we've had. And so it is of concern. It is something that I, you know, task Visit Jersey with understanding and reacting to and working out how best to prepare for next year. I personally do think there are things we could do with our advertising and our marketing which are different to the way we do it. I'm not convinced that just one big brand rollout is the way to do it. I think we've got to get much better at tactical marketing. We had Super Try last week. We got Super Marathon in a couple of weekends. They're really niche key sports which attract large audiences. I don't think we're advertising to those audiences and saying, look, we've got this event coming to Jersey next week, you know, next weekend, come to Jersey, you know, linking these things. I think that's tended to be left to the industry in the past, but for some reason I don't think it's happening at the moment. And I think we need to work with industry to get that tactical marketing happening. Visit Jersey did do tactical marketing this year around packages, and that was broadcast about a month ago, and they've had huge success. They sold just shy of 1,000 seats over a 3-week period, I think it was. So I think we do need to be able to be more flexible and react to market conditions. And that makes a lot of sense, given that we know people stay for shorter periods of time and they book much closer to their departure date than they used to. And so I'm not convinced yet that either the hotel sector or Visit Jersey as marketing are really in that position where they're acting and reacting to the market.
So thank you for that, which has actually addressed my strange question. I think the reason why we're asking it is because some of the perception that people have about the visitor economy performing well is not being experienced. And I think what we're trying to get from yourselves is an indication about where you see that improvement, where you see that stimulus happening,
I would hope so.
accepting that there is a transitional period, but people are not feeling it. People are not feeling confident about it at the minute, and that's why we're asking the strange question.
It's really interesting as well, because we've been kind of pitched in the media against Guernsey these last few months. Now, Jersey's tourism industry is twice the size of Guernsey's tourism industry. We get 1.9 visitors per head of population. They get 1.2 or 1.02 possibly visitors per head of population. So they get barely one tourist per islander. We get nearly 2 tourists per islander. So we have a much bigger industry. And as I said, last year, Guernsey's industry fell by 14%. Jersey's has fallen by 16% this year. And we can attribute some of them directly to things like the ferries or the problems of Blue Islands. So a large part of that 25,000 loss of air passengers will be the problems from Blue Islands. So I think, we need to put it into context. We mustn't get drawn into the one island versus the other debate. They are two very different visitor economies. Ours is a much bigger visitor economy, and it will remain for the foreseeable future a much bigger visitor economy. I wish Guernsey all the best of luck in developing their visitor economy. I think we are better working together in that respect. But one of the messages I got when I started my term of office from Guernsey was we do not want to mark it as the Channel Islands. That was the message I had from Guernsey back in 2020.
I think the questions are about what we're doing here, rather than drawing any comparisons.
No, I'm just saying, but I'm the one who's seeing in the media how we're being pitched against Guernsey.
Should we bring in Mr. Corrigan? I think he's been waiting to speak
Apologies.
as well.
First of all, I think we're doing a lot. There's an extra 40% of funding has gone into Visit Jersey this year compared to previous years. So I think, as I outlined at Public Accounts Committee yesterday, since Visit Jersey's creation, their budget has been pretty much flat for that whole period. So that reduces their buying power year on year with inflationary pressures. And obviously in the period since COVID, other jurisdictions are marketing themselves ever harder and throwing ever more money at this. And Jersey hasn't done that until this year for the first time.
I'm the first minister to increase the budget at all.
With this extra £2 million. That said, Jersey can't necessarily buck other much broader macro trends. So if you look at EasyJet's passenger numbers overall, not just to Jersey, their overall routes in and out of the UK, they're experiencing downward pressure on volume. Jet2, another airline that serves Jersey, they're experiencing downward pressure, so failing to meet passenger growth forecasts that they'd set for themselves. We're not immune to those same pressures. That's people choosing to keep the money in their pocket and not travel. And if they're not travelling by air, they're not necessarily travelling by ferry either, whoever the operator is. So we just have to be mindful of those wider external downward pressures, and we have to market ever harder into that mix to ensure that we get a fair share of representation for Jersey's offer, and obviously our fair share of wallet in terms of those that do choose to travel.
I think it's really important as well, and I've tried to say this before, and I try to be very diplomatic, but the recent sale that Visit Jersey did with a UK operator and was offering, packages to Jersey at lower prices, proved that really, and this is in discussion with Visit Jersey, proved that Jersey has a price problem. And so, quite simply, by bringing down the price, and that Visit Jersey themselves subsidise those prices, they got, in a few weeks, 1,000 visitors. One of our big issues is price and value. And I was recently comparing a hotel in Newquay with a hotel in Jersey. Both very similar hotels, same star rating, etc. The hotel in Newquay was over 30% cheaper, £100 cheaper, £100 cheaper. But the room in Newquay was 30% bigger than a room in Jersey. So Jersey was paying 30% more for a holiday in Jersey for a 30% smaller room. That's a bad value. And these are the structural issues that we have in the industry. And that's where, one, I really welcome new hotel stock. So we've got the Strive application and we've got the Millbrook House Hotel application, because I think they can set new standards. But it also shows it's really hard to change room sizes, for instance. But that's what we are trying to do in part through the Better Business Support Package. It won't change room sizes. That's a lot more money needed for that. But to help those businesses invest in revenue management systems that will help improve their productivity, invest in, invest in a new foyer if that's going to help you do it.
Minister, can I just bring in
These
Deputy?
things haven't been invested.
Yeah, Minister, you just touched on about 2 applications for hotels.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know whether you have any figures available in terms of the number of hotel beds in the island for the last few years, and whether you believe
Approximately 9,000.
approximately 9,000. And do you believe there are potentially limitations now in terms of with the stock being reduced from where it was a few years ago, that potentially that has impacted with some people maybe not coming to Jersey as well?
So so I think that's one of the, so a lower number of beds, it's pure supply and demand,
Yeah.
is likely to see prices increase in the rest of the beds, particularly in the tourist season. And those beds that are left, because there are fewer of them,
Yeah.
you're likely to see prices rise as a result. And I just talked about price being an issue in Jersey, and it is. And it's not just because of beds. You know, minimum wages, things like
Yeah.
this, taxes on duties, you know, they all add to the price situation in Jersey. We're a high-priced island. But we've been at roughly 9,000 beds for a while. I mean, it's been slowly chipping away. It is something we need to change, but what we have is massively excess capacity outside of the tourist season. So those 9,000 beds, ultimately, aggregated across the whole year,
Yeah.
in a sense, their average is probably quite good in terms of occupancy.
Yeah.
But what we have is probably a shortage in the summer, peak of the summer, but the rest of the year we've got too many beds. Now I want to, what we need to do and what we're trying to do with events and an event-led tourism strategy in that
Yeah.
respect is get beds being filled outside of the summer season, and that's something that's
I mean, what changes would you like to see in order to actually see the hospitality industry thrive, and in particular the hotels as well?
So I really want to see the hospitality sector working with government, and they are. Don't get me wrong, we've had really good dialogue. I said last time I was here that we're setting up working. We have set up. We've met twice. I think that maybe needs to turn into something which is a lot more formal in terms of actions.
Yeah.
Because again, you don't just want to be talking shops. You need actions. The industry does need to understand strongly that it's a two-sided piece here.
Yeah.
There's the government side, government, Visit Jersey, etc. We need to be doing the things we need to do, and I'm always listening. I had an islander send me suggestions recently for tourism. I agree with many of them, and I'm delighted that they sent me those ideas. So we're always listening. But there's also a lot of work to do on the hotel side as well,
Yeah.
on the hospitality side. We've got a wonderful restaurant retail offering in Jersey. That's really good for our visitor economy. We're doing up the public realm. That's another thing government's doing. We've invested a lot in heritage and the realm of heritage over the last few years.
Yeah.
Deputy Tudier knows about the Elizabeth Castle, etc. There's a lot more than just Elizabeth Castle have been done. So the government side is doing an awful lot. And what we do need is to try to help the industry get its product into the place that it needs to be to offer the value
Yeah.
that our prices demand.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Deputy Wilson now. We're going to move on to a related subject of ferries, DFDS.
Okay, Minister,
That's
can
'cause they're
you...
which ferry company?
Panel is pleased that you've committed to publishing an
Yes.
appropriately redacted version of the concession agreement. Can you advise the panel when you think this will you'll be able to publish the agreement?
In not too long. Richard will be able to tell you in the sense of they're part of the way through the redaction at the moment. That's going on at the moment. We need to get it checked both legally and also DFDS need to weigh in with their suggestions. And I don't think we've gone to DFDS yet.
It's gone to DFDS earlier this week to their legal team in-house to look at the proposed redactions for the government side and to consider those. If there's any others that they would wish us to consider making, we will consider that, and then it will go through the Law Officers Department. But I think, as I said in the Corporate Services Scrutiny panel last Friday, under a sort of similar question, we don't want to just publish a very dry contract. We want to put some explanatory notes around it as to why certain clauses exist and what they actually mean in practice through the contract management life cycle, so that it's as useful to the reader as it possibly can be. Otherwise, in its very legal form, maybe of interest to the very many lawyers that live and work in Jersey, but may not mean quite as much to the travelling public and to the island consumer. And let's be clear, every household in the island is touched by ferry services, whether it's freight or for those that choose from a discretionary basis to travel as a passenger.
So that sort of links into my next question, which was, is your guidance note going to almost explain what and why things have been left out and why they've been redacted?
I think the redactions will be sort of fairly obvious as to why. So if I give an example of the types of things that would be redacted, in order to justify making the level of investment that DFDS has committed to over the life of the contract, there has to be a certain target return on equity that they make over the life. Otherwise, the investment case just doesn't stack up. Mm-hmm. But it would be hugely sensitive commercially to publish their target return in a contract that's open to every other ferry operator to then go and have a look at. So things like that would be redacted because it is of the utmost commercial sensitivity. The fare structure, again, is on a minimum fare, a mean average fare, and a maximum fare. Some elements of that would be redacted because, again, that gives away part of the passenger pricing model that is important to DFDS.
But they're not competing with anyone on the Jersey route, so why is it commercially sensitive?
But there's lots of other routes that are not necessarily direct, but are other comparable routes. So, it's important that those are commercially sensitive, and we will work with them to see what we can and should reasonably publish versus other aspects that really are commercially sensitive.
Do you think that those discussions would actually involve some confidence between government and DFDS about what the least restrictive approach to releasing information would be?
That's exactly what we've taken. And at the end of the day, the decision will sit with the Minister as to what he believes he wants to put into the public domain. So we will make recommendations and the Minister will be able to determine appropriately what should go in, and to the extent that that needs legal advice around it. But let's be clear, in a tender process, the FDS have committed a fare structure in their tender. Condor have committed, and it was Condor in the Jersey tender, not Brittany Ferries, as people would pretend to be the case. Condor committed a fare structure. That's not going in the public domain the way that you might, an unredacted contract would put the DFDS fare structure in the public domain, because it's commercially sensitive to both parties. Mm-hmm. So that's why they far more comprehensive than the outgoing operating agreement, which from Jersey's standpoint was a really poor agreement that meant when we had to act on things, we simply didn't have the teeth to act. And that was negotiated by a different minister, different chief officer at the time. I believe, and don't put words in the minister's mouth, I think we have a contract that has teeth, that is commercially appropriate, that underwrites resilient services well into the future and secures significant investment in the passenger experience and resilience of the freight supply to the island.
Okay, and just to press you on how soon we will see this, Richard, please.
So my expectation, all being well, is mid to late October. So I'd say late October at the very latest. Okay. As I say, it depends how long it takes to go through law officers. The contract is written under English law. Mm-hmm. So you have a Danish company, you have a Jersey contracting authority as government. The contract is written in English law. So if there are any complexities, we may have to run it. Jersey law officers deal with Jersey law, so we may have to go through English lawyers if there's any sort of points of contention or dispute in what is to be published. So we want to get it published as soon as we can, but I would say as a backstop date by the end of October at the latest.
I'm in your hands on that. I'm playing no role except to sign it off. I'm not playing any role in it.
No. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Sean.
Yep, thank you. Minister, you've obviously been made aware of work that's been undertaken for the frequent traveller scheme, and I just wanted to know whether you could provide us with an update.
Yeah, well, so last I spoke to DFDS management was that they were absolutely working on that and they expected it to be out soon. Okay. I didn't have a date. I don't know if you've had a date since then.
No, so they have a group-wide scheme because they operate passenger routes in a number of different areas. So there's a group-wide scheme that's under development. There is a level of impatience, I think, on our side to have something in place sooner, and I think that's reflected by the travelling public. So we've asked that they accelerate something through sooner. In one of the businesses that I believe they acquired down on the Gibraltar Strait, there was a sort of an existing loyalty program in there. So they are looking at whether that could be adapted and implemented for Jersey more quickly than the current group-wide scheme that's under development. So we don't have a definite implementation date yet, but it's part of the active discussions that both the Minister and the Chief Minister had with senior DFDS leadership a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Minister, can we turn to some, we'll obviously, once the document's been published, it'll be easier, I think, for us to ask questions, and there'll probably be a flurry of public interest and media interest, so maybe park some of that for now.
That's a lie. Am I allowed to lie?
Sorry?
I said I look forward to it, and I said that's a lie. Am I allowed to lie? Scrutiny.
Yeah.
You're allowed.
Minister, there's been a lot of comments about flat rate cards, about the potential increase for freight fees, and also this the fact that harbour fees have been charged retrospectively. Can we start with the latter, and can somebody explain to us in layman's terms what's the issue been around the harbour fees, the way that they've been applied retrospectively, why that happened, why it seems to have taken businesses by surprise?
Yeah. Do you want to go for that one?
Well, I don't know, do you want some
I was going to say
top lines
there
about
are
some of the
two
recent
fees.
reports?
So, and I think I've discussed them before. There was the fee based on weight, and that was one that I understand DFDS had trouble billing. Actually, the technical side of it, and so that's the bit that's been applied retrospectively. That's
When you say they had trouble billing, what do you mean?
I don't know. I'm not them. You'd have to ask them.
So I think with the FDS, let's recall that the contract was signed on the 31st of December, and it could only safely be signed then after we'd extinguished the sort of legal cases, the frivolous legal action that Brittany Ferries brought. Contract was signed 31st of December, services started on the 27th of March. So a 3-month build-up to establish a fully blown ferry service, all the vessels, the crewing and everything else. One of the aspects that was later coming through was the actual processing of all the billing. So obviously DFDS were being invoiced for the services that they were receiving from ports and stevedores and everything else. And they were having to then get their team in Jersey up and running, not just in terms of crew, but also the bit that sits behind all of that.
But they must have known what the fees were going to be.
They did know what the fees were going to be, yeah, but it's the actual billing of those fees, because on things like tonnage, number of trailers, who the customers were, getting the customers in the first place onboarded to DFDS systems. So what they've done is tonnage charges that are applied at the Port of St Helier. That's always been the case, and that has always passed through from the ferry operator, whether it was Condor or now with DFDS. That's always been a chargeable aspect. The second aspect, which is the part that I think people are considering to be more contentious, is the unit charges per trailer that are charged both at Portsmouth International Port and by the Port of St Helier. And they equate to about £68 or so on each crossing.
On one leg.
On one leg of the crossing. That's the part that was previously absorbed by Condor within their freight rate. Now, the very opaque nature of Condor's rate card and their charges doesn't lead easily to comparison from one era to another era. And secondly, Condor was a crippled business financially, hence them coming to government's door asking for £40 million of taxpayer support between Jersey and Guernsey just to keep the services running. So the fact that Condor was doing something doesn't A, make it right, and B, remotely make it affordable. So DFDS, when we've considered the tenders that have come from all the operators, the rate that they have proposed in their model has been assumed to be the rate that is being charged per lane metre for the freight. In other words, this is what the ferry company is charging for its service, not absorbing charges from elsewhere. In the case of DFDS, what we've expected is that they will pass through any other ancillary charges to the importer. So in this case, it would be charged to companies like Woodside Logistics, Ferry Speed and so on, and it would be up to them the extent to which they then bundle that in with their own charges and onwards to the retailer or the importer at the end of the scale. It's that second charge that DFDS have been much delayed in processing, and therefore it's come as more of a surprise to retailers and to the importers, where previously those were charges being absorbed by Condor, but were clearly unaffordable, and it was an unsustainable model of Condor absorbing those. And that's the part that we're at the moment. So we're working with DFDS around the surprise aspect. We don't believe that any charges should come as a surprise. We don't believe charges should apply in a retrospective sense. DFDS have absorbed those charges up to the 31st of July. Customers are presently on notice that those charges would be applied through from the 1st of August. But we are talking to DFDS around how that looks between now and the end of 2025, and whether those should indeed pass through, or whether some other mechanism might be applied so that if people are stuck in onward contract, that those contracts aren't unduly upset by the pass-through of these charges. So that's a work in progress. There isn't a conclusion to that at the moment in terms of ongoing discussions with the Minister and with DFDS as well.
Although it has to be said that if it is put off further, that it has to be recouped somewhere, so it will be recouped in a charge somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a process issue which will be corrected itself. I think the concerns that have been raised by business is the financial impact of that on them. How do you respond to that?
Do you want to touch?
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting, obviously we all saw an open letter recently, which talked about 5.8% increase in freight costs. And, you know, I think it was being mistakenly put to the public that this was different to the 0.4% increase in the cost of goods on the shelf that we had said was the information we were provided by the chief economist at the time. And it is really simple. 5.8% of 7%. 7% is the JCRA's own analysis of how much the distribution of goods costs on the shelf. So when you pay £1 for an item on the shelf, 7 pence of that pound is in the distribution of that item. So 5.8%, the increase experienced by that company, of 7%, which is the cost of freight and distribution, not just freight, but all distribution, comes to 0.4%, which is exactly what the chief economist predicted the cost of goods on the shelf would be. So it's entirely in line with the expectations.
So how do you respond to the
It's entirely in
misperception?
line. It's entirely in line with expectations. And certainly in that letter, it was a total miscomparison of two completely separate units of measurement.
Okay.
Minister, so the letter, the open letter, I think that was written by the chief executive of Sandpiper, also talks about another issue. So he says that you didn't consult with retailers before taking the course of action. I presume he means in the tender process, and also to adopt a flat rate. So I suppose let's talk about the flat rate card. You told us that the flat rate should be providing more transparency in terms of freight charges. We've seen with this whole retrospective charging for parts of the freight bill, which is highly unusual to get, and it's really impacted a lot of businesses. We've had businesses tell us that they're wondering whether they're going to be able to afford to pay those, or whether to pass the charges on, and whether they're going to be able to operate next year.
They should be passing on those charges to customers.
Yeah.
But if they've already billed their customers in advance, they're finding it difficult to justify those charges.
So this is what I was saying. So the charges that weren't being charged, the DFDS has not backdated them to the 1st of January or the 1st of April, 31st of March. It has said it is starting to bill them from the 1st of August, and it isn't backdating them. The previous charge, the other charge, the tonnage charge that was in from the beginning of the contract, I know that the very largest operator of freight services had been billing their customers for that charge. So, and they have about 90% or 85% of the market. So 85% of the market had paid for all those charges since the start of the contract anyway. So it is, you know, not good if there are some businesses that are paying that tonnage charge backwards, and it may affect those, and I really feel for those. But it's clear to me that the vast majority of businesses had already paid those charges, and the other charge, the DFDS, aren't backdating.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the flat rate card, because I think you predicated the flat rate card saying that it'd be better for everyone to know clearly what the charges were going to be. But essentially, the flat rate means that discounts are not allowed to be given for bulk purchases. So does that not mean that actually we're applying, we're actually increasing costs for everyone rather than allowing some bigger importers to get discounts?
No, what it says is we're treating what is a monopoly route as though it was a bridge, a toll bridge, etc. And what we're saying is that whether the ferry is running empty or the ferry is running full, it's still costing the same amount to run that ferry. And we are not asking the ferry operator to discount against itself, because there's no competition to be had here. So there's nowhere it can win business. It's stuck with this level.
But you didn't do that for Condor.
No, that's one of the mistakes I'd say was made in the past.
But so I'm trying to find out where the call came from for that flat rate card, because it doesn't seem that anyone else, I don't even think the JCRA have called for a flat rate.
No, they called for greater
They've called for greater transparency of freight rates in previous reports. So
But you can have greater transparency without having a flat rate, can't you? You could just say publish your discounts.
You can, but why? So the freight forwarders are not they do not control demand. Demand for freight coming into the island is the aggregate consumption of island households. Not even island businesses, because island businesses are essentially supplying onwards to a customer, which is typically you and me, okay? So the aggregate demand sits with the household, and that's the many. The kind of arrangements that people are talking about benefited the few. So discounts in favour of one single retailer or one single logistics company channel that value into very, very few pairs of hands at that business
Why
level.
is that a concern of government? I mean,
Because somebody else has to pay. So if you take the £56 per lane metre charge from DFDS, that's effectively what they need to charge. If they're bringing in 600,000 or so lane metres of freight a year, to make that viable and to deliver a resilient service through the year, they need to charge 600,000 lane metres of freight at £56. So let's just follow your argument through. If you started to ladder that out, some would get it cheaper on volume, somebody else would be paying a lot more. So at the end of the day, all you're doing then is distorting other aspects that are adjacent parts of the supply chain. The end user still ultimately pays somewhere along the line.
They will pay the aggregate same amount.
Yeah, everybody ultimately is going to pay the same amount. So that's the point, that the controllers of demand are the households.
But it's not unusual in businesses for a big importer. If somebody says, look, I'm importing 70% of your imports, therefore I want to get a better price.
Where there is competition.
It's not just where there's competition. I think Jersey Milk, for example, charges different rates to its retail customers than it does to maybe people. So at what point does government...
Well, Jersey Milk doesn't have retail customers. Jersey Milk charges a sum to the retailers. So you've your supermarket retailers that will buy volume, and then there's a charge that they may make to other providers. But the point I'm making is that in this monopoly service, and there is other milk available within the island, and there are other drinks available, other types of milk.
Is there other milk?
Well, oat milk, soy milk. There's other
that's
products.
not real milk.
But they're not Jersey dairy milk, is the point I'm making.
It's not milk.
There is one ferry...
UHT milk is available in the island. It is milk. It is not provided by Jersey.
There is
Dairy
one...
necessarily.
There is one ferry operator for the island. There is no economic logic for the ferry operator to discount its own structure in favour of one buying group versus another.
But it doesn't matter if there's no logic, though. It's up to a business to make its own commercial
If there's no logic,
decisions.
why would you do it?
Well, if they want to if they want to offer a discount, they can offer discounts to foot passengers, presumably.
We're talking about freight, we're not talking about foot passengers.
But I'm just wondering, to what extent do your government ideology, to what extent will you apply that across the board and dictate their business models? That's what I'm asking.
We haven't. We've tendered to the marketplace, and the marketplace has 3 ferry operators tendered originally in the Channel Island tender, 2 tendered on the Jersey-only routes. They tendered the price structure, and they set the price. So the market has set the price. The DFDS has set the pricing that the ministerial team at that time said that's the operator overall that we wish to go with, taking account of a wide range
Minister,
of factors.
what we've had put to us is that, and it's a reasonable presumption, is that if one of the big importers used to benefit from a discount, they could then pass that discount on to customers.
Did they?
And now they're not allowed to do that.
I was going to say, did they pass it on to customers?
So I'm asking the question that if now they're being charged more because everyone's just being charged more, they're saying that they can't pass that discount on to customers and therefore prices will go up.
They can pass many discounts on to customers because they, again, when you look at goods coming to the island, 40% of the cost of freight to the island, only 40% of it is the ferry cost, 60% is the ferry service provider, so Woodside, Ferry Speed, and I'd love to say there are others, but they all went out of business because the previous operator was discounting to such an extent against the biggest provider that all these other businesses went out of business.
And did you...
So now what we've done, but there is 60%, okay, of the cost of anything coming across the Channel to Jersey, 60% is entirely at the discretion of the freight services operator. 40%, the minority of that price, isn't, because that's the cost of the ferry, and that's
the
now been
port
said. Pardon?
And the port dues.
And the
that own
port
that
dues.
40%.
Sorry, yes, 35% is ferry, 5% is port dues. And so they still have 60% to play with. And that's the bit which has been opened up. That 60%, if I decide to set up a freight services provider today, I can now set my pricing in that 60% area to compete against the other ferry services providers. Previously, where discounts, and who knows what discounts, because none of us know what discounts were given by Condor to freight services providers. None of us know what discounts were given by Condor to freight services providers. That clearly was building up anti-competitive tensions within the freight services market, because we saw many freight services providers go out of business over the last 10 years.
Did you refer it to JCRA? Because you have a regulator.
There is a formal investigation of freight market pricing arrangements underway by the JCRA at the moment. It's a matter of public record.
Did you refer anything at the time to the JCRA when you had concerns about Condor's operations?
Yes, at the time we first had as government some firm evidence, and that firm evidence actually came from an individual very closely engaged with the operations. That was referred immediately to the JCRA. They determined then that had crossed the threshold for them to start a formal investigation. That formal investigation is ongoing. So we await the outcome of that with interest. Also, we have the amendments coming forwards to the competition law that will place even greater powers on the JCRA in terms of market studies, so steps short of formal investigation. And we expect those to be used fully. And we intend to use those in the first instance around tackling the pricing within the supply chain, particularly for essential items.
I'm really concerned about the previous supply chain. So over the last 20 years, we've seen all warehousing leave Jersey in order to create a just-in-time supply chain. We have seen now we are being told of pressures in that supply chain which potentially lead to safety issues. And I am very worried that this just-in-time supply chain that we have in Jersey, which treats the island as though it was just an appendix to the M2, we're just further down the road, so maybe it's the M3. We're not. It's 90 miles of water, which can be storm-ridden, that is full of other boating traffic, and is therefore needs to be crossed safely and with care. And I'm very concerned that what we had seen over the past 20 years in this move to a just-in-time supply chain is that pressure from various areas of our economy bearing down onto the supply chain and making it certainly less resilient and potentially less safe. And I think that might be something that we need to look into.
Could you give us an example of that?
I don't want to give an example today.
It's a pretty powerful statement to make.
I said it's my concern. It's not a statement. The statement is of my concern and something that I think we need to look at.
Thank you. And I think you may have some other questions on that in that area, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you. Just coming on to the resilience and the transport links, the Auditor General found that in awarding a 20-year concession agreement, the states are committed to an exclusive provider for a period a third longer than was originally specified. She found no formal documented assessment of the impact, benefits and risks of the decision to award a longer concession. Can you advise the panel why no assessment of the impact, benefits and risks of the decision to award a longer concession took place?
So I can't, because I'd recuse myself from that process. What I would say, though, is in the CNAG's report, these are not identified as findings or recommendations. So they are remarks that she has made in the report with the documentation that her team had requested at the time. There's a lot more documentation that the government holds, including requests from those that had tendered, which I've been able to see retrospectively, having sort of come back into now the contract management. We're able to see that and see that the operators, to justify the level of investment that was being sought in terms of new vessels and so on, that a longer...
That with the RPI-based limit on increases in freight pricing, that actually chairmen of major retailers in Jersey may in a few years' time turn around and say, well, this is a much better regime because now we know where the pricing is going every year. Remember, just last year, we saw an 18% unexpected increase from Condor in their freight prices, out the blue. No one knew it was coming, 18%. Today, the chairman of Sandpiper is complaining about a 5.8% increase. Well, that's nothing compared to the 18% cost in ferry prices, sorry, not freight prices, ferry freight prices.
But are there caveats? So could
I
prices,
just think it's really important that
Minister,
we have that.
are there
transparency
caveats to that RPI? Are there conditions which would trigger DFDS being allowed to increase their prices by more than RPI?
Absolutely, there are.
What
But
are
again, they can be things such as the returns are not sufficient to enable investment in the services.
So how do we know that won't happen? They'll
Well,
just
because
say,
we will be able to. I'm not saying it won't happen. What I'm saying is we will know about all these things in advance. Condor, out of the blue, said our prices are going up by 18%. Out of the blue, none of that will be out of the blue in the future, and none of it, I doubt, will ever be anything like 18%.
remain to be
Again,
seen.
I said at the beginning, only time will tell.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the chairman of major retailers will be much happier having an understanding of where ferry prices are going and how that affects. They will be able to provide.
The freight charges
They're
that,
huge
are,
benefits
that
to
are
the
affecting different companies.
We're
and
shining a
different
light on
trailers.
a very obscure and untransparent part of Jersey's economy. And we're shining a light on it through this new system. And that means that everyone will be able to have a much better understanding of where people are profiting, whether it's excess profiting, whether it's not, they'll be able to move to other competitors. I know that businesses are already shifting their supply chains precisely because of the flat rate charge, because it gives them the ability to do that. And that does mean that some companies will lose as customers move away from them potentially.
I think the
But
concern
that's why people complain, because it's
the concern
a new regime.
the concern we're hearing, Minister, is that everybody is paying more. So it might be fair, but it's fair because everyone's paying more.
Everyone. Well,
I don't believe you're talking to enough people.
That's what we've been
well,
told.
so first of all, everyone would have been paying more whether we granted a contract to Condor for this new term or to DFDS, because in all of the bids, freight prices were going up.
Okay.
So everyone would have been paying more, full stop.
Okay,
What we now have is transparency, because in the offer that was being made by Condor, that lacked the transparency that was sought in freight market pricing. It remained an obscure arrangement that would have been difficult to police in practice.
I think the reaction of the market in the next coming months will speak for itself. I think more than any.
I think the short-term
government
reaction of the market
speculation.
is one thing. I, as you know, am here as the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, which means long-term economic development. And I'm, on this particular question, the shouting that happens now is of concern to me, but it is not as important as exactly what happens over the next 20 years. And I believe that the transparency that they will have in pricing, understanding from one year to the next where the cost of the ferry is going, will help them hold their freight services provider to account, and will help them understand the true cost of bringing goods to this island.
okay.
I know we're limited for time. Just hold the thought for now. But I think coming back to transparency, one of the issues that we've got, and it comes back to the idea about why we're asking for the concession agreement to be published, is it's really difficult to have any meaningful public discourse in this area when the public doesn't have access to that document to say what are the figures, what's in front of us, what are the commitments, what are the caveats that will allow this company to increase their prices in future if they do not achieve.
I think that's true, but equally, some of those that are making complaints at the moment aren't necessarily transparent about the performance of their own businesses and the profits that they've been making from Jersey for very many years.
But I haven't finished my question. So the question really is, first of all, in the decision-making process, which of did the Council of Ministers all see the contract? Because we had a situation where the Chief Minister the other week came out saying that he thought it was a disgrace that there wasn't going to be a high-speed ferry service. And I think you went to the media and said there's no obligation for DFDS to run a high-speed ferry service in the winter. So how do you account for those kind of discrepancies? And that's the first question. Why would the Chief Minister not know that there's no obligation for
Again,
the company?
you have to ask the Chief Minister that.
But did he see the contract before it was?
You have to ask the Chief Minister.
Well, no, I can ask you because, you agreed the contract. You signed off the...
I think I've said in this forum before, I won't speak for another minister. I don't know. You have to ask.
I'll ask a different question. When the tender was awarded to DFDS, had all of the ministers seen what the tender the concession agreement?
No, because it didn't exist at that point in time. So what the decision came before the concession agreement. So the decision was made by the Council of Ministers, and it was based on all the information that had come in through the tender process. And that tender process is what me and all the other ministers, again, people all look at me, but this was a Council of Ministers decision, and I was accompanied throughout this by other ministers.
So the second question is, who saw the concession agreement before it was signed?
The only people I know who saw it were officers, myself, and the Harbour Master, because the Harbour Master and myself signed it. But I don't know other ministers who saw it or not.
So when the Chief Minister said, I was led to understand that DFDS would be running a high-speed vessel during the winter, that might have influenced his decision to support your decision to award it to DFDS.
I think it's unlikely that that was said. I don't know. I mean, obviously, as you said, you weren't the officer, but...
He said that was his understanding.
No, but listen, the tender document, so what was tendered by all of the operators around their scheduling was very clear. There was a stipulation in the requests for proposal, the invitations to tender, for a certain number of rotations through the winter and the summer and so on, and bidders responded accordingly, and those have been contractualised. Those are all matters, so they will be unredacted elements, as far as I see it sitting here today, of what is put into the public domain in the concession agreement. But there is no explicit requirement in the contract for high-speed craft sailings over the off-peak season.
And I will come in and say
That's
there
right.
absolutely should not be a requirement for high-speed sailings over this.
But that's not what I'm asking.
No, and
because
I'm just saying, I want on record, because if we were to demand high-speed ferry service...
but you're answering a
throughout the winter
question,
season,
Minister, you're answering a question I haven't
speaking
asked.
for myself,
You're answering a question I haven't asked, and therefore you're taking up time.
well, fair enough.
So the point I want to get to is, have either of your assistant ministers seen the concession agreement? Do they have a copy?
I don't think so.
No. Have any of them asked to see the concession agreement?
One of them has, yes, recently.
And when did she ask, or he?
Oh. Yeah, she, as it seems that, I believe actually she asked you, Chair.
She asked
because
me to see it.
I believe she asked you to see the concession agreement. She hadn't asked me, she asked you before she asked me.
If she asked me, I would have said, I can't give it to you because it's confidential. Ask your ministers, ask your officers, which I believe she did. So have you given it to her yet?
I don't believe
I've
officers
not been
have.
asked by Deputy Scott, and I presume it's Deputy Scott you're
I
referring
only have
to.
one female.
And have you been asked, Minister, to give her a copy?
Yes, I was.
And have you given it to her?
No, not yet.
Why not?
It just hasn't happened yet. I haven't seen, in fact, Deputy Scott is on holiday at the moment. And so I just haven't seen her since then. It was during the middle of a States debate.
Do you need to see her
and
to
I
give it
haven't
to her?
seen it. At the moment, no. I think it's something that I think does need to be looked at and handled in the appropriate way. Because
point-
Deputy Scott doesn't have delegated responsibility for ferries, and so there is no obligation on me to give Deputy Scott the concession agreement. I've said that I will, but I think it needs to be in an appropriate manner.
The point I'm trying to get to is that it seems to me you've got two very capable assistant ministers, one of whom's got a vast amount of
I have
experience
three very capable assistants.
I might be missing one. Who's the other one?
I don't know who you're thinking
So,
about.
so anyway, in Constable Jehan, you've got somebody with an amount of logistics.
Deputy Ferry, Deputy Scott, Constable
Yes.
Jail.
Thank you. So the question I've got is that what safeguards have you taken about around groupthink in the sense that have you been involving wider political discussions from other members of the Council of Ministers and your assistant ministers when coming to agreements around the ferry service and how to deal with some of the backlash that you've been getting around it?
The backlash is by people trying to protect their previously well-protected situations, okay? And as far as I just was trying to say it previously, as far as the ferry tender was concerned, at no point was I ever on my own making this decision. The whole process was a council minister's vote. Throughout the situation, I was supported by Deputies Gorst, Deputies Miller and Deputy Luce, and the Chief Minister when he came in, and a whole suite of officers, both Government of Jersey officers, Ports of Jersey officers, a consulting body, KPMG, and a law firm, DWF, and law officers. At no point in this process was there ever just me.
But
I do think it needs to be more widely remembered that it was not just me. I may sign the bottom line when it comes to the contract, But this was the Council of Ministers' decision.
But
And this was a wide group of ministers involved from the beginning.
to award it to DFDS, that was a joint decision, but the concession agreement is solely your work and done in-house. Is that correct?
No, it was the law officers, the law firm, it was the Ports
from
of
a-
Jersey,
from a minister-
and it was myself.
From
I
a
had to sign
ministerial
it at the end
from a
of the day.
ministerial point of view, there was no other ministerial input, not even from your assistant ministers.
No, because the assistant ministers weren't there. This was over Christmas period as well.
So what you're saying, the
I believe some
concession-
assistant ministers were on holiday at the time.
So you can say the success of the concession agreement will be purely down to you, whether it succeeds or fails.
The concession
Absolutely
agreement,
not. Absolutely not.
the concession agreement contractualises the winning tendered bid. That's all it does. It puts a document provided by a ferry operator into a legally binding document.
It's the
of all
detail, isn't
parties.
it? It's the detail.
But it's contractualising the tender documents themselves. So the schedules that were committed to, the vessels, the level of investment, and all the major elements that were tendered are contractualised. That's put together under legal advice. And yes, there is one signatory at the bottom of it from the
No, there's
government.
two signatories.
There's one from the harbour master because the harbour master grants the ramp permit, and there's one from the operator as the counterparty to the contract.
No, that's good. It's clear.
So it's absolutely not. It is, again, a team of legal advisors, a team from Ports of Jersey advisors.
Well, of course,
and a
but
team-
you're
so
the, what I'm
you're
saying
never on your own in any of this.
is you're the ministerial. They're not up for election, are they, Minister? You're the point of contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the one who
And
shoulders the
I'm a
responsibility.
minister who makes strong decisions for Jersey and in the interests of Jersey.
But
that
you
protect
shoulder the
Jersey.
responsibility for it.
As you
politically.
see, I keep coming back to answer the same questions repeatedly.
Well, yeah, just on that, so you do accept that you're the sole political lead for this?
No, I think the Council of Ministers, we agreed this as a Council of Ministers. I was supported throughout the process by a team of ministers, 4 ministers. So no, this is not just on me. This is the whole lot. But what I will say is that I believe that we have a much better situation with regard to freight, as that's where we started on, than we have had in any period in my lifetime.
Okay. Any questions? Deputy Wilson?
I suppose the question is, there's been a lot of talk about transparency, and it does concern the panel that the concession agreement hasn't been shared, and for that to be an issue. And one of the things that we would seek is whether or not there would be any barriers to actually sharing that agreement, so that your ministerial team was fully informed. Given that you've just said this is a shared,
I
responsibility.
think we need to understand about conflicts of interests.
So you believe
First of all-
there's a reason for not doing it as
No,
well?
that's not what I'm saying. But I think it's up to me as ministers to which of my assistant ministers or otherwise I share something with. That isn't, I believe, from our perspective. I think from transparency perspective, I think Jersey has forgotten this. You are the scrutiny panel. It was shared with you, unredacted, straight away. That's the function of
But
scrutiny.
after
That's
it-
the job
yeah.
you were meant to do.
After it had been,
And I do-
Minister, can I just clarify, after it had been agreed, so we didn't see it before it was agreed?
Because you can't.
No, but just to clarify, so,
work in that
so any
situation.
scrutiny we're doing,
I think Jersey,
any scrutiny we're doing can only be done retrospectively.
that's absolutely correct.
And also, it's very difficult for us. Do you accept it's difficult for us to ask questions of you in a public forum when
I accept,
the
but
document's not
I
in the
had the
public
same
domain?
situation, and that's just what happens because we're working about inward investment in Jersey.
Yes.
We're trying to make sure that Jersey is a functioning economy able to work, and that means that not everything can be played out in public. I do sit here and say, because I have to say, obviously, my decision has been compared with Guernsey's decision time and time again. Guernsey has not shown its agreement with Brittany Ferries once to anybody. Guernsey's not even calling for it, okay? And so there is part of the backdrop in this where I sit there and I say, that's fine. You open me up and what I've done and what I haven't done, but I notice that none of this is happening in Guernsey at all, where the incumbent, who effectively maintained their service, is able to carry on with an agreement that took place in secrecy, and a situation that's in secrecy. We are not like that. But it
this
does
is the
make it quite
strength of
difficult
you
because I'm the
being
one
able to
person.
respond
I'm
in
the
a
one person
transparent
who
way, isn't
I
it?
seem to be the one
Through our
person
line of
who has to
questions.
answer for this.
Well, that's what I'm
No, and
saying.
I know we can't talk about Guernsey, but what I'm trying to say is it does make it difficult at this side to sit there and say, okay, so we're showing everything, and I'm being compared. If I wasn't being compared, then it wouldn't matter. But because I'm being constantly compared to Guernsey, And yet Guernsey's showing nothing. So Guernsey, as you know today, you know nothing about Guernsey's agreement. You know nothing about the situation with regard to their freight pricing. You know nothing with regard to their ramp permits. You know nothing because Guernsey knows nothing about it. In Jersey, it's a very different situation.
I would add to that, though, you're also just looking at a single contract for one operator. You have no idea of what the other tenders had, and you have limited idea of all of the backstory that went through with the process of the very crippled situation that Condor was in and the way government had to respond to that, but also the work that was done much further back around alternative models to deliver freight services to Jersey.
And that's what we've been trying to do through our scrutiny.
We've not been asked for any of that previous work that dates back 3 or 4 years.
With respect, Richard, we've asked a lot of questions around what has led us up to this situation. So the point that I would just like to finish on is I welcome your expression of your explanation as to the reasons why you've made decisions. In a sense, that is transparency.
Absolute transparency.
Well, just let me finish.
Because you're not getting any transparency from anyone else.
Just let me finish. So please don't see it as an attack. It is just an attempt to actually, provide the public with some clarity as to the position that you would wish to defend, but also the questions and the line of questions that we would like to take in order to get greater transparency and greater explanation. And I think
it's just difficult when the comparisons are all made to Guernsey and they show nothing.
And we're not comparing it. We're literally focusing on the situation as it is in Jersey. And you're quite right in the sense our focus is about this contract and it's about the impact on the economy for Jersey. And that's what we're trying to do, is to try and get to the detail, trying to get down and drill into in order to respond to some of the concerns that we still hear about it.
Yes.
And that's why it's difficult. I think it's difficult on both sides, but we're doing our job, which is trying to actually get the detail, and we're trying to get the explanation out.
The detail as the scrutiny panel. That's also your job.
We now have it.
Your job is to say we read this,
we know
we
what
understand
our job
it.
is.
Could I just quickly say, because I need to correct something, because it was being made with regard to assistant ministers. Before the assistant minister in question asked you for the contract, I do not recall ever being asked for the concession agreement. The first request that I understand, and I may be mistaken, but the first request that I recall was to you and not to me.
I'm not going to disclose private correspondence, but what I will say, if any of your assistant ministers had asked me to see the contract or what was in the contract, I would have said, I can't give that to you. You can ask your own officers.
I appreciate that. I don't recall being asked by any of my assistant ministers to see the concession agreement.
Okay. So you might want to check that, because
maybe I have.
I understand that you've had a request and it may have come in 2 weeks ago, but that's a matter for you, Minister. And obviously what you share with your assistant ministers is up to you.
But that's what I was saying.
Yes.
My understanding was during the state's debate. But we've also got to understand, family situations with regard to people working in supply chains and things like that.
I'm happy to tell you what's in the public domain, and you can confirm whether you understand this, is that at a St Bullard meeting, which one of the journalists present was also at, there was a suggestion that I had the concession agreement, but that she didn't have it because she was an assistant minister, and I made the point that as an assistant minister she could ask to see it.
Yes,
as well.
And that's not a delegated.
That all happened in the public domain, and I understand that subsequently she has asked you to see it. But
standing at the top of the stairs during a state's debate.
Thank you. So, Minister, I think we're at the end of our hearing. So, can I thank yourself and your officers for coming in?
Absolutely.
And